In this video, we're going to talk about voiceover websites. Especially when you're starting out, it can be quite tricky to work out exactly what you should be putting on a website and whether or not a website is even necessary in the first place. I mean, to start off with, if you're an actor, then you might already have a website, in which case creating a voiceover section for it where you have your demos and a little bit about you, your recording space, and maybe your clients is probably a good place to start from. I kind of came to it slightly differently because of my branding for my voiceover stuff. And especially when I started out, because I worked in the corporate sector, I wanted to make my acting website and my voiceover website quite separate. So they are two separate sites, but they are interlinked to each other, so you can switch in between. But I thought what might be useful is for me to just quickly go over my website as it currently stands in the first quarter of 2021 and explain some of my decisions and why I prioritize certain things and why I skip other things as well. Not just so that I can come across as a know-it-all, because I certainly don't, but so that you can look at other voiceover websites, do a bit of a compare and contrast, and then make your own decisions. So, starting off with the homepage, and here is my face. And yes, I mean, essentially I'm not going to go too deep into the whole branding thing, but one thing that I would say is that it's quite central to be memorable as possible. Obviously, a picture of yourself goes a long way in doing that. It gives you a certain identity as a result. What makes you unique is yourself. And obviously, there are quite a few people who will, especially if they work in animation or anime, will have an illustration or a cartoon version of themselves, which can also work to a certain degree. But I still think it can run the risk of looking a bit generic. What makes it you? Obviously for me, I also kind of like double down on my own British brand with the teacup, and the colour scheme as well is something that I wanted to kind of really think about. In terms of the colours, I think it's very important to think about what your favourite colours are, essentially. Things that represent you but also excite you. So I think this website looks quite cool, and that's one of the reasons why I'm sharing it. And hopefully you should be excited about your website as well. So this image here incorporates the colour scheme. It also has the teacup, which is a bit of a motif to the whole English-British RP brand, in which I'm kind of selling as well, which is important. But kind of regardless, it's memorable. I will always be the guy with the teacup, and even on all of my email correspondence, it's something that I incorporate in there. Makes me hopefully a bit more memorable than just another face or just another animated image of some kind. And then when we kind of scroll down, also noting that I have made a little sort of kind of like logo. First and foremost, I would think on your voiceover website has to be your demos. They have to be front and center because they really are your calling card. The aim should always be to get whoever visits your website, to get them listening to your voice as soon as possible. So having them here, very, very easily available in a variety of different genres, and also making the tracks downloadable can be incredibly important. And the reason why I do that really especially is that, first of all, in terms of with the actual voiceover correspondence that I have, rather than asking people permission to send them MP3s, which they may not want anyway because it might fill up their inbox really, really quickly. Instead, if you make it downloadable, then that's what you can reference as an offering in your email correspondence instead. So that they actually have the choice if they want to download the demos or if they just want to save your web address for future reference. Either or, you don't second guess what their ordering system is, you just give them the options. So I do make sure that they're all downloadable here as well. And then I have a little bit about me. So for this section, which is basically an explanation about what the British RP, received pronunciation brand, is, but it could just as easily be about you. I then kind of go on a little bit about where I actually have experience in all of the different kind of sections that I do. Again, not necessarily revelatory in any way, but sometimes I think it's very important to go Do you do audiobooks or don't you do audiobooks? Do you specialize in animation? What is a specialism that you have, if any? I then have reference to some nominations and awards, which is always kind of nice. And then, having had the demo aspect of it, the audio demo aspect of it, what I've then incorporated is a visual voiceover demo. And this goes on to a much broader point which I'd make, which is that you should try and track down portfolio pieces, visual portfolio pieces, actual finished products featuring your voice as soon as possible, because I mean, essentially it can be a much more engaging experience, as well as proving that your voice has actually been incorporated into some real life campaigns in some way. But having that visual aspect, especially when a lot of the people that you're going to be reaching out to are going to be dealing in visual mediums that require voiceover as well, well, that's going to be speaking much more to them than just having the audio track. It's not something that I make downloadable, except if it was on request, but I still think it's nice to have. I mean, all of this stuff here is hosted on YouTube. Vimeo is also an option, although I don't think with Vimeo that you really need that high quality. You just want something to load up consistently and quickly. YouTube is quite a universal solution to that, so that's what I use as well. And again, we're kind of scrolling. Notice the reason that I have a home page that scrolls with all of the pertinent information on it is, I mean, it's essentially because the vast majority of people will be actually, well, not the vast majority, but a good few are going to be actually coming across this on their phones. And so therefore, there are points to be made about where increasingly that people like to scroll as opposed to click on links. And again, we're trying to make this process as frictionless as possible. So if all of the pertinent information is just by them scrolling down to find it, then all the better. We then come to the kind of the jazzy bit, the clients include section, which hopefully shows a bit of my kind of like range, and obviously that's a nice thing to say. And then I think this is a really kind of a core aspect to my website as well, which is like reasons that they should work with me specifically. So it's again taking the issues, the problems, the obstacles that my potential clients may have, and making me a resource as a solution to that, so that I'm client-centric as opposed to this is why I sound so great and this is why you should work for me, which is essentially what I'm saying. So the super fast turnaround, being able to do a free demo, remote direction, none of this information is revelatory. The vast majority of home studio voiceover talent will offer all of this, but it's making things clear, concise, so they know absolutely what I do and don't offer, and have very clear criteria to it, which I think is invaluable. And then towards the end, I do offer up a little bit about my own kind of like background, how I got into acting and then into voiceover as well, which I think is a nice kind of optional extra. I don't think it's the type of content that you would necessarily choose to lead with, because essentially you're a business, and obviously it depends again in the genre that you're operating in. But I would say for the vast majority of people, it might not be something that they're interested in. But for those people that do, in terms of an About Me section, I think it's nice to have it on that first kind of like page, so then they can get a bit more of an idea of who I am, where I come from, what my likes are, that kind of thing. And that bit of personality, again, hopefully makes me a bit more memorable. And again, you'll see that these images, these different brand images, is something that I've incorporated all the way through, but also the color schemes, the grays, the blues, and the whites are kind of what kind of tie the site together. And then at the end of every page that I have a call to action, because essentially what do I want them to do is to get in touch. So it's either to contact me or it's to listen to my demos. We've already had a couple of calls to action on that main page about listening to my demos, so that seems pretty straightforward. And then at the end is where I put my social media links at the bottom of the screen. And the reason why I do this, as opposed to integrating my social channel more directly into this, is that as soon as you do something like that, there's the risk that people may click on Facebook or Twitter or what have you, and actually go off my website, in which case it's much more tricky to get them back, because they'll see notifications or they'll see a cat video or something, and yeah, I mean, why would you want to? So that's the main kind of like core aspect. But then I also do have some different sections that I've kind of like built out. So I have got a how it works section for those people who maybe don't use VoiceOver on a consistent basis, or they've dealt directly through an agent or something else. So I explain exactly what the process of working with me looks like to a novice, including FAQs as well. So hopefully I've covered most of the bases there. I do have a blog, which I started initially as a kind of exercise in search engine optimization. Everybody said, oh, get a blog. And sometimes it was useful to me to kind of literally work out my own thoughts and that kind of stuff. Nice to share, again, a bit of my personality. And the reason that people say including a blog is good is because if you regularly update it, then you may rank higher in SEO. Now I replace this mainly with my YouTube videos, as I make them occasionally as well instead. It seems to have a similar kind of like function, a bit more organically as well, but it's not a crucial part to it. Then really there's the My Portfolio section, and this is something that's probably changed the most in terms of my whole VoiceOver offering, generally speaking. Beforehand I had just a separate page with essentially all of the video work that I could find with use of my voice. And that was a nightmare essentially to upload, in terms of it took ages to load up, which was problematic because people wouldn't wait around for it to do so. But still, it's nice to have all of the different video examples of all the other kind of work that you do. So instead, what I decided to do was incorporate some feedback that I got from a great website designer called Karen Worth, who works specifically on websites for voice actors. And she suggested creating more pages, which kind of goes against the whole like scrolling is what the majority of us do now kind of feedback. But the idea of creating more pages, because then if you have more pages for Google to crawl through, then that is a way of pushing up your SEO. So I thought, okay, that's one way that I could improve my SEO, which is great, but how else can I justify making these pages loads of different separate pages? And so I thought I'd divide them by genre, which obviously is useful first and foremost when I'm reaching out to people. If I'm reaching out to someone who works in e-learning, if there's a specific e-learning page for them, or someone who works in gaming or specializes in mocap production, then I've got a specific page that I can direct to them. And then I can actually literally tailor it specifically to that audience a bit more. First of all, by using a couple of key phrases, but even, in terms of iterating on my brand, having a kind of 8-bit digitized version of my main brand image as a kind of a riff to show that there's basically a core voiceover, this one, sometimes in a t-shirt, sometimes dressed in my brand colors, but then having a little bit of fun with it, and that I work in different genres. And then really what I've done is on one side, on the right hand side, I've taken my demo in black, which is already readily available on the homepage. I've literally broken it down track by track, because occasionally there might be a specific type of a specific track on one of my demos that they really like, and they can download that independently rather than having to download the whole reel. So that's one reason as a justification for having the separate page for the genre. And then also on the left hand side, I'm able to give an explanation of my experience in that particular niche, people that I've worked with, again, coaches and other great practitioners who I've worked with in that particular area as well, and the certain skill sets I can emphasize that will help me in gaming or e-learning or in commercial narration, all of these types of things. And then at the end as well, again, this is where I can actually stick the additional video work, which I wouldn't have space to put on in my homepage, but here instead I do. I've got my video game show reel here, and then a couple of trailers as well. So again, it's a place where I've been able to put my additional content. Then after all of these sections, which as you can see pretty much work the same way all the way through from commercial to corporate, which again work as links, and all of them are, naturallyrp.co.uk/gaming, so that they all kind of make a logical sense. They've all been kind of like named appropriately. Although I've mentioned SEO a couple of times, it's not something that I go super kind of crazy powerful on, because I'm directing people here myself through my email correspondence rather than relying on search engines. But still, working with someone like Karen Worth, it can be invaluable, because she'll make sure that you are using certain keywords at certain times, that the header that you use is in the right format, so that it's read most effectively. If you've got all of this content here, then you might as well order it as effectively as possible, so you do get the odd person just randomly contact you, having found you on Google. Every little bit helps. And then, as I said before, I've got my acting website connected to this, so this is all interlinked, completely separate sections here, but it's a whole different kind of like thing. I've got the coaching section as well, and then also the contact. So again, it's about selling yourself very concisely and clearly. All of the key kind of like information here, the option of a form if they want to use a form instead, my representation. But as you'll see with the majority of these, and also with every single one of these portfolio pages, they'll end with those images, which I think is effective. So yeah, that is essentially what I think should go in a voiceover website. Obviously, branding is a long-term thing, and one thing I would say is that obviously you want to put your best foot forward, but I would say feel free to just kind of like start out with a really basic site where even if you've got just one demo, putting that front and center. If you can make it downloadable, great. If you can't, then don't worry about that either, just so it exists, and having either your name or a clear, strong brand name that's memorable is kind of really core, but making it so that it is a kind of clear link into itself, so that the people that you're contacting don't need to comb through lots of different things to find the information that they need. It's there, and you've made it easy for them. And then you can think about adding some of this information in due course when you want to. But essentially just having a space and reserving your domain and all of those kinds of things, that's the important thing to do to start off with. And then contact people with that. Don't be afraid to do that. As long as your demos are quite good, you shouldn't be reserved in doing that to share the capacity for work that you do. And then from that, as you improve your website and your online presence, if you feel that you need to, if you feel that it's actually getting you more work or could get you more work in any kind of way, then you can use that as something that you can illustrate in your follow-up correspondence. So part of your narrative in terms of growing as a voiceover artist generally will be the improvement in your brand and the improvement in your website and online presence as a result. So that gives you extra reasons to follow up with these people. So I hope that that's been a useful insight into some of my thought processes behind my website. If you have any questions, then please do feel free to comment below. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe, and do let people know that this exists. Thanks so much for taking the time to check this out, and see you next time.